by demerarawaves.com.
Good day with your major newscast. I'm Jessica Daw. First with the highlights. The Federation of Independent Trade Unions in Guyana is calling on the private sector to increase wages and salaries for private sector workers and calls on the government to raise the national minimum wage. A man was early this morning burnt to death in a house on the east coast of Demerara. Guyanese law student Roletta Barrow is the 2022 Commonwealth Caribbean Rhodes Scholar. The director of the Pan American Health Organization says relaxing of COVID measures threatens the gains made to lower COVID infections in the region. Now for the news in the region, Suriname's state-owned oil company Staatsolie has shut down its refinery temporarily to make way for repairs, but will not cause a fuel shortage. In Trinidad and Tobago, the president of the Scrap Iron Dealers Association, Alan Ferguson, is calling for greater regulation. And internationally, Poland authorities say more than 200 migrants have tried to force their way across the border from Belarus with the help of Belarusian forces. The details of these stories and more in just a moment.
Advertise with us on News Talk Radio Guyana 103.1 FM for best coverage on programs on motivation, beauty and health, parenting and relationships, knowing your rights, and a variety of enlightening content, and get value for your money. Call our helpful staff today on 223-1056 or 223-1041 today.
Now for the news in detail. The Federation of Independent Trade Unions in Guyana, FITUG, is calling on the private sector to increase wages and salaries for workers in their employ to match the government's increase. In a statement, the umbrella union called for private sector businesses to offer increases to their employees. The union says while the pay raise may not have met the expectations of some, the increase is several times more than what those employers are offering to their employees in the private sector. The union says it cannot be ignored that there is a widening disparity between the national and public sector minimum wages. The FITUG says the recent announced increase by the government has widened the salary gap between the public and private sectors to a $30,700 per month difference. The union says this means employees at the national minimum wage level in the private sector must work 2 months to earn $70,000 their counterparts in the public sector are earning. The union says the current national minimum wage is pauperization wage and again urges the government to address in a meaningful manner the long outstanding issue. FITUG says the need to raise the national minimum wage has become an urgent need for an adjustment. A man was early this morning burnt to death in a fire at his residence at Market Street Enterprise, East Coast, Demerara. The Guyana Fire Service has identified him as a 54-year-old Swavash Gulchand. Investigators are reportedly trying to ascertain the cause of the blaze. The fire service says that due to radiated heat, 2 vehicles located on the western side of the building were severely damaged. The fire department says it was made aware of the fire at 3:40 this morning. The fire service is again urging citizens to equip their homes with smoke detectors and fire extinguishers and to be careful when cooking or using electrical appliances. Guyanese law student Roletta Barrow is the 2022 Commonwealth Caribbean Rhodes Scholar. This announcement was made Wednesday by the Governor General Dame Sandra Mason at Government House following a full day of interviews. According to a Nation News report, Roletta Barrow was chosen from among 12 candidates who were interviewed virtually by the selection committee. The other interviews vying for the prestigious scholarship came from Barbados, the Bahamas, Trinidad and Tobago, Grenada, St. Vincent and St. Kitts. Dame Sandra described the interview process as an exciting but compelling exercise, which showed that the Caribbean is crammed with able, articulate, engaging, brilliant, and passionate young people who are committed to regional development. Her Excellency added that based on what she has seen in her capacity as chairman of the selection committee for the past 4 years, the region was in good hands, provided that the region seeks to maintain and retain its brainpower and capabilities of the youth. Roletta Barrow is currently enrolled in the Bachelor of Laws program at the University of the West Indies, Cave Hill campus. Next October, Miss Barrow will be heading to the University of Oxford to pursue the Bachelor in Civil Law. Police say ranks in the Upper Berbice destroyed a quantity of suspected marijuana plants on a 10 acres farm yesterday. The ranks visited the Upper Berbice Ibini area where the farm was located and found approximately 60,000 marijuana plants ranging from 6 inches to 10 feet in height, in addition to 600 pounds of dried marijuana plants. Police say one male was at the farm but fled the area. Police say in addition to the farm and dried marijuana, 5 camps were also destroyed. Former Public Works Minister under the APNU plus AFC coalition government, David Patterson, says the National Procurement and Tender Administration Board, NPTAB, continued failure to conduct due diligence before awarding contracts breeds corruption. The former Public Infrastructure Minister says NPTAB since 2017, under the APNU plus AFC coalition administration, an obligation was placed on the tender board to conduct due diligence.
Under the coalition term from 2017 onwards, in response to efforts by some bidders to attempt to submit fraudulent information in their tenders, MPTAB was required to conduct a full due diligence on the recommended bidder before approving the recommendations of the evaluators. MPTAB were required to check and confirm the validities of the company's registration and other source documents. And additionally, since they were the entity that had all the historical records on all government procurement awards, it was also their responsibility to ensure that no bidder submitted incorrect previous work experience details.
Mr. David Patterson says the comments by the chairman of the board falsely declared that due diligence was not a requirement in defense of the award of a contract to a new local company.
This comment was made in response to questions pertaining to the award of a contract of $346 million to Statement Investment Inc. for the construction of the Barmia Primary School in Linden. The award to a company that was only registered 6 months ago and has no similar work experience should have immediately made their bid unresponsive based on the tender requirements. This has correctly raised questions on the role of MPTAB.
In the absence of Public Procurement Commission, NPTAB awards of contracts have come under scrutiny. Public concerns were raised over the decision to award a $346 million contract to statement construction for the construction of a primary school in Bamai Region 10. Opposition leader Joseph Harmon has criticized the government for its poor handling of the COVID pandemic in Guyana as he again calls for a unified approach to fighting the pandemic. Opposition leader Joseph Harmon came out with harsh criticism for the government, with October and November registering the highest COVID deaths in Guyana.
The last 2 months have been our deadliest months, but this government continues to do less by encouraging careless and reckless actions through its COVID-19 measures. You see, not all of us can set up sanitation units in our yards, and therefore the problem we have is that when the government relaxes measures, cover up cases in schools and public offices, cover up and have no monitoring of public transport, relax the curfew, fail to manage COVID-19 hotspots, the perception that is being created is that the virus is no longer as deadly or as contagious.
Mr. Joseph Harmon says the inability of the government to devise a plan beyond vaccination is hurting the vulnerable groups more. He urged citizens to get vaccinated and be responsible.
Even though vaccination coverage is not as high as we'd hope, in many densely populated areas of the Americas, preventive measures have been lifted or relaxed.
As we have said before to citizens, over a year now, please take all necessary measures to keep yourselves and your loved ones safe. Continue to wear your mask, sanitize, and wash your hands. Stay away from crowds. Get vaccinated. If you are unsure, get clearance from a doctor. But by all means, get vaccinated. I know food prices are high, but eat as healthy as you can. Vaccines help, and so do our other actions. So I'm urging all citizens to ensure that we take the necessary steps to deal with this COVID-19 virus. The government is doing nothing to help us.
The opposition leader says citizens must now take responsibility for themselves in the absence of prudent action on the part of the government. The director of the Pan American Health Organization, PAHO, says relaxing of COVID measures threatens the gains made to lower COVID infections in the region. The director, Dr. Carissa Etienne, pointed to Europe, which is experiencing more waves of COVID infections as they relax measures and are now forced to lock down again. Dr. Etienne says the Caribbean is vulnerable and following in the path of Europe is inadvisable.
Even though vaccination coverage is not as high as we'd hope, in many densely populated areas of the Americas, preventive measures have been lifted or relaxed. And this is a worrisome combination that keeps us vulnerable to the virus and threatens our hard-fought gains. With the approaching holidays and upcoming summer vacations in the Southern Hemisphere, I wish to take a moment to remind everyone that our individual and collective decisions chart the path of this pandemic.
The PAHO director says the region still falls short of vaccination targets.
While 51% of people across Latin America and the Caribbean have been fully vaccinated against COVID-19, there are 19 countries in our region that have not reached the WHO targets to vaccinate 40% of the population of every country by the end of this year and 70% by mid-2022.
Ghana, as of Tuesday, November 23, fully vaccinated 53% of its adult population. Dr. Etienne says the last Christmas seasons taught a lesson of COVID surge after the holidays and urged people to be responsible during the holidays.
But as we have said time and time again, vaccines are not the only tool to protect us against COVID. And that's why the last point I want to stress is that public health measures are key to reducing the spread of this virus. Mask wearing, social distancing, and avoiding large gatherings, especially indoors, will remain important, even as more of us get vaccinated. There is no room for complacency because we've already faced the consequences of an uncontrolled pandemic, and we don't want to be in that position again.
The PAHO director warned against large gatherings during the Christmas and urged persons to get vaccinated. Guyana has seen a decline in positive cases overall, but is warned by the Ministry of Health that 3 regions, 2, 3, and 8, are still registering high infection rates. The government has adjusted the curfew hours to allow more time for businesses to operate. Now for the news in the region. Suriname's state-owned oil company Staatsolie has shut down its refinery temporarily to make way for repairs. Star News reports that the refinery will be closed for 3 weeks, but there will be no fuel shortage. Staatsolie spokeswoman Enid Bergvall says it decided to close the refinery after the catalyst in the hydroplant was deactivated and had to be replaced. She told Star News that there is sufficient stock of fuel and there is no fear of a shortage. The closure of the refinery started on Saturday. The company explains that the catalyst is a granular material that facilitates chemical reactions in the manufacturing process. The refinery was shut down in February for maintenance and will undergo an early round of maintenance. In Trinidad and Tobago, the president of the Scrap Iron Dealers Association, Alan Ferguson, is calling for greater regulation. The 120 scrap yards that fall under the association have increased the collection and export industry from $14 million in 2010 to more than $380 million. Ferguson wants the industry to continue to flourish, but regulated to prevent illegal activities. The Trinidad and Tobago Scrap Iron Dealers Association wants the government to finalize a scrap iron policy languishing since 2013. Ferguson told Business Day the industry does not only provide a vital service to the nation free of charge, but added that the growing industry continues to benefit Trinidad and Tobago through bringing business and much-needed foreign exchange to his country. The president of the association says there are about 20,000 people directly and indirectly involved in the industry. Ferguson said the industry got most of its high-grade scrap metal, HMS, from the oil refinery Petrotrin, and since it closed its doors in 2018, the industry has been clamoring for proper-grade material. And lastly, in the region, in Antigua, an almost $5,000 fine has been imposed on a 22-year-old man yesterday after he admitted to importing 2 pounds of cannabis. Romar Bailey, who was born in Jamaica, was charged with the possession of cannabis, importation of cannabis. He was also charged with being concerned in the supplying of the cannabis valued at more than $5,900 after a drug bust at the airport a few months ago. Police and customs officers conducted an operation at Liat Cargo on August 11 and discovered a container with the controlled drug hidden inside cans of gourmet caramel corn. Bailey was represented by Michael Archibald, pleaded guilty to importing the contraband but denied the charges of possession and possession with intent to supply. The prosecution accepted his plea, withdrew the other 2 charges, and Magistrate Ngayo Emmanuel Edwards proceeded to sentence him. Bailey, who has lived in Antigua since the age of 9, was given 2 years to pay all of the monies to the state, or he will be jailed for 2 years. Here now is your international news from the BBC.
Hello, I'm Moira Alderson with the BBC News. Poland says more than 200 migrants have tried to force their way across the border from Belarus with the help of Belarusian forces. A Polish official said the migrants used tree trunks to flatten a razor wire fence and threw stones at Polish soldiers and border guards. She accused Belarusian soldiers of supervising the attempted crossing. The NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg accused Belarus of goading migrants along the border with Poland.
And when it comes to Poland and the situation on the border with Belarus, we have condemned the actions by the Lukashenko regime, using vulnerable people, migrants, to put political pressure on neighbors. This is inhumane and it's cynical and something that we strongly condemn.
Britain and France have called for stronger international coordination to tackle human trafficking after 27 people died trying to cross the English Channel on Wednesday. The British Home Secretary, Priti Patel, said there was no quick fix, but that she would do whatever was necessary to stop people risking their lives crossing the Channel.
I've once again reached out and made my offer very clear to France in terms of joint France and UK cooperation, joint patrols to prevent these dangerous journeys from taking place. I've offered to work with France to put more officers on the ground and do absolutely whatever is necessary to secure the area so that vulnerable people do not risk their lives by getting into unseaworthy boats.
The World Health Organization says only 1 in 4 health workers in Africa have been fully vaccinated against COVID-19, leaving the bulk of the workforce dangerously exposed to the virus. Our Africa editor, Will Ross, has more details.
All countries in Africa said they'd prioritised health workers when the vaccination campaigns against COVID-19 began. It might then seem surprising that just 1 in 4 of them have been fully vaccinated. After a long period when very low numbers of doses were reaching Africa, the World Health Organization says supplies have increased in recent months and that some of the low coverage is due to vaccine hesitancy. The WHO's Regional Director for Africa, Dr. Matshidiso Moeti, warned that a new surge in cases was looming due to the end-of-year festive season, and she called for countries to speed up the rollout of vaccines to healthcare workers urgently.
A military general from the United Arab Emirates who's accused of torture has been elected as the new president of the international police agency Interpol. General Ahmed Nasser Ul-Raisi, who is head of the security forces in the UAE, was elected to a 4-year term. Allegations of torture of high-profile political prisoners have been filed against the general in courts in several countries, including France and Turkey. World News from the BBC. 11 people have died in Russia and dozens are trapped after a fire broke out in a Siberian coal mine. Rescue operations at the site have been temporarily suspended because of the risk of explosion from high levels of methane gas. More than 30 people remain underground with no communication. 3 days of national mourning have been declared in the region. The European Commission has proposed that the bloc's vaccine certificate should be valid for only 9 months after the second dose. The European Commissioner for Justice said that after 9 months, certificates would no longer be recognised if there wasn't a booster. The move is to encourage member states to administer booster vaccinations as quickly as possible as cases of COVID rise across the region. The Pope has promised to do everything in his power to help crisis-hit Lebanon at a meeting at the Vatican with the country's Prime Minister. In his 20-minute conversation with Najib Mikati, Pope Francis likened Lebanon to a dying person and promised to help it rise again. Around a third of Lebanon's people are Christian. The country's currency today fell to an all-time low against the US dollar. After more than 70 years of stop-start attempts to excavate a 3-kilometre ancient walkway in southern Egypt, the 3,000-year-old Avenue of Sphinxes in Luxor will today be open to the public. Rana Taha has more.
Last-minute preparations are being made in Luxor ahead of tonight's grandiose unveiling of the Avenue of the Sphinxes. It will connect the two greatest temples, Karnak and Luxor, effectively turning the city into an open-air museum. The ceremony will incorporate elements of an ancient festival which traveled down the walkway annually 3 millennia ago, and there will be new music inspired by stories written on the walls of the temples in hieroglyphics. The hope is that all this will boost Egypt's ailing tourism sector.
BBC News.
And that was your international news. Here now is a recap of the highlights. The Federation of Independent Trade Unions in Guyana is calling on the private sector to increase wages and salaries for private sector workers and calls on the government to raise the national minimum wage. A man was early this morning burned to death in a house on the east coast of Demerara. Guyanese law student Roletta Barrow is the 2022 Commonwealth Caribbean Rhodes Scholar. The director of the Pan American Health Organization says relaxing of COVID measures threatens the gains made to lower COVID infections in the region. Regionally, Suriname's state-owned oil company Staatsolie has shut down its refinery temporarily to make way for repairs, but will not cause fuel shortage. In Trinidad and Tobago, the president of the Scrap Iron Dealers Association, Alan Ferguson, is calling for greater regulation. And internationally, Poland authorities say more than 200 migrants have tried to force their way across the border from Belarus with the help of the Belarusian forces. And that was your major newscast. I'm Jessica Daw.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.
Disinfecting surfaces for the removal of the virus causing coronavirus disease 2019 requires the use of strong disinfecting agents. A few examples would be bleach, hydrogen peroxide, and you can use substances such as 70% alcohol or isopropyl alcohol, or a number of other substances that contain quaternary ammonium compounds, such as Lysol spray or disinfectant wipes. In order to correctly disinfect the surface, there needs to be a use of the disinfectant agent with an applicator. This applicator can be anything from cotton wool, gauze, or a clean, dry cloth. In order to disinfect the surface correctly, you must soak the applicator or your material with the disinfectant of choice and wipe your surface in one direction. After disinfecting the surface, you need to leave the disinfectant in contact with the surface for about 1 to 5 minutes, depending on the type of disinfectant that is used. As soon as the time has passed, and this time is referred to as your contact time, you can then proceed to use the surface. For other disinfectants, such as your disinfectant sprays and wipes, like Lysol and Clorox wipes, it's advisable that you use as directed, based on the instructions that are written on the back of the can or container that contain these substances. And usually the contact time for these substances is between 1 and 10 minutes, with 10 minutes giving you the best results. There are a number of other substances that claim to have disinfecting properties, such as Fabuloso, Hygenol, and substances of the like, but it should be known that these substances tend to remove germs rather than kill germs. If you will be using these substances, it is advisable that you first apply them, then use any of the substances previously mentioned in order to completely kill the organisms from the surface. thereby rendering the surface coronavirus-free.
December 24 to January 1, you can get your greetings 6 times each day, streaming with your image on Christmas Day. 5-minute live broadcast.
All this for $20,000.
Or 4 times each day
for $15,000.
Right here on NTRG.
Call us on 614-8205 or 692-9400 for details. Merry Christmas from News Talk Radio Guyana, 103.1 FM.
News Talk Radio Guyana, 103.1 FM. Radio that educates and entertains.
Christmas again, and everybody want a raise. Though we struggle and strain, not one of them said their praise. But they take to the streets, they're doing it in sun and rain. They could have selling little sweets, they choke your neck and take your chain. Oh Santa, Santa from Guyana, he lining every day cause he walking no way, but he got 3 and 4 child mother. Oh Santa, Santa from Guyana, he playing that he bowl, but you're solely and he fool. If you catch one, you'll find the other. Women can tell, because they mostly get attacked, that they hardly could a yell. Santa so quick they get a shock. The housewives now scared, speaking out against the crime. See them wearing false beard, dressing like mad at Christmas time. Oh Santa, Santa from Guyana, could simply drive a truck, but he turning down the walk cause he got the old damn agenda. Oh Santa, Santa from Guyana, he deny a little child a happy Christmas with a smile. How the hell I could call him brother? Small I did know, this is a special time of year. The Almighty made it so, in peace and love you have to share. But Santa have it wrong, he learned it from a different source. He really wrong and strong, he taking it with brutal force. Oh Santa, Santa from Guyana, he waiting by the store like a watchman at the door. He would rap down to the grandmother. Oh Santa, Santa from Guyana, he doing it for fun, shooting people and run. Police must work a little harder. Santa don't care. We got the whole town on the run. Is everybody done fair? That very soon Christmas will done. If he not snatch then he loot. The man that thief from break or down. He is a what is ghetto youth. The mother preacher still ain't gone. Oh Santa, Santa from Guyana. Look at the work that he choose, give him flimsy excuse. Say he grow up without a father. Oh Santa, Santa from Guyana. He could be saved by the bell up he way straight to hell. He better pull it himself together.
For guys like me, but Santa, I want you help me find my baby, please. Santa, I wanna borrow your sleigh. Santa, I gotta find my baby today.